Warning, I'm going to spoil the ever-living hell out of Omori, as well as Before Your Eyes and Night in the Woods. I will also be talking about some topics such as suicide and mental health. Please do not continue if this will affect you.
Kill me somehow, isn't it? Are you gonna throw a box at my head? Hey baby! The game. Teleport.
ディオほう向かってくるのか逃げずにこのディオに近づいてくるのか近づかなきゃてめえをぶちのめせないんでなほうほう
Harrison, you bitch! Jake
What is
making
this,
gains?
rookie hour? Get out of there. Here I come with my numbers. Oh yeah. Oh, I love this one. Come here, guys.
No.
Uh-oh, you've got your own coom gun, I see.
Thank you, boys. How's it going?
Please, please. Are you serious? Oh!
I can imagine a title as deliberately provocative as me disliking what has rapidly become a legend in the RPG Maker-esque Hall of Fame will have me shot in the head by a sniper at any moment. I want to start by saying that I actually think Omori is a fantastic game, through its music, its art, and its gameplay itself. But I'm of the belief that while you can love games that are bad, you can also dislike games that are good. Although the dislike of the game is probably rooted in the player's belief that something is bad about it in the first place, which you'll see later on. And while Omori is fantastic on all fronts, I disliked it. We'll get to why later on. First, I'm going to talk about why Omori is good. Bit of an odd writing choice considering the title, but I do this ultimately because the game being so good is what led to my dislike of it by the end. If that doesn't make sense now, don't worry, it will. So, ladies, gentlemen, all in between and beyond, let me explain to you why I disliked Omori. When I first began streaming this game on Twitch, I was sent a thread of tweets about OMOCAT by my friend. I don't like using the word controversy, because it's always used in a context in which the person being accused 100% did the things they're accused of, and it's only called controversy to get some mileage out of some false debate. I'm not seeking to really give my own opinion on this, not a lot anyway, but I don't know how many Omori fans know of it, so I wanted to quickly cover the thread in order to put my video in context. OMOCAT has a Twitter. If you scroll through it, all seems well. Some nice tweets about Omori, some stuff about merch, just generally someone enjoying success and interacting with fans. Nothing wrong with that. Very epic. But wait a second. What's this? This, right here, maybe just a little bit, and I use this word sparingly, sus. In 2014, the same year of which it reached its goal on Kickstarter, OMOCAT made this tweet about Shotacon, saying how it's not inherently erotic and it's not weird that she says that. Now, I didn't know what this meant, so I typed it up. I am extremely uncomfortable. There was also an Omori blog in which OMOCAT drew Omori as this suicidal and depressed teen. Not much bad about that, good drawing, sad tale, inspiration for a smash hit game. Also, very epic. But you know the tissue box and white space? Well, the comic confirms in its first panel that it is used for that reason. I am uncomfortable once again. When this got pointed out to her, OMOCat did the classic "you're just easily offended" shtick and said stupid stuff like "I love anime" and everything problematic about it. You know, a measured and mature response to what I imagine was someone just trying to warn her that Shotacon, which means this, probably isn't great. Now from experience, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and obsesses about things oriented around children like a duck, it's a duck. But I'm not going to go any further with it because 1, calling someone a nonce in a genuine way is quite a hefty accusation, and 2, I really don't care. Why do I bring this up? Vengeance? Disgust? Boredom? No. I bring it up because it's worrying how few people know about this. I'm not going to voice any opinion about it. The dislike button is going to get battered enough as it is. I don't need to give any more incentive for people to crucify me. So feel free to make your own conclusions. Just please do not think any praise I give to the game is an endorsement of any of the Looney Tunes shit she said. Unless she pulls a Scott Cawthon and funds a homophobic death militia in Uganda while shaming me for being just so intolerant of others' opinions, I feel her sus behaviour is something I can partially overlook for the sake of a video game. I, like many esteemed people of culture on the internet, like art. I am trying to get better at art. Am I good? In my opinion, decent, but there's still work to do. Once again, I am a man. Of culture. A man with questionable levels of disposable income. So let me use my certification in hating the working class to exercise my exuberance in how much I love Omori's art. Omori has a two-pronged approach to its art. Pixel art for general gameplay and exploration, hand-drawn art for important cutscenes and combat. The art in the dream world is cutesy and childish, excellently showing Omori's possible stagnated maturity in his age, as well as his longing for the days of old when he was 12 and he was happier. Whereas the art in the faraway town looks far more mature and sharper. The contrast between these two gameplay areas emphasizes the disconnect between what Sonny wants to be real and what the real world is, as well as him being unable to move on from past tragedy, which coincides with what the game talks about. The way the areas are laid out themselves are visually appealing too. Faraway Town has that Possum Springs vibe. It's not exactly a decaying small town that you feel trapped in, yet feels familiar and homely even when you lay your eyes on it the first time. The dream world is where this truly shines. The meandering paths of the vast forest, the organised mess of the playground, the snaking alleyways of the junkyard, the Vietnam flashbacks of the Firefly Forest, all still resonate with me almost a month after playing the game. The fact that these areas loop adds to the whole foundation of it being a dream, of Sonny being lost in the recesses of this alternative reality that he can only escape when he's confronted by the less appealing aspects of the past. These areas are distinct enough in their colour schemes and layouts and reminds me a lot of Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. The different worlds you go to are all interesting in their creativity, exploring castles and islands and deserts and volcanoes and alien motherships and the innards of a massive alien Yoshi, but we won't speak about that because that's just vor. This also extends to the enemy design in the hand-drawn areas of the game. Bunnies, spiders, bread, shark mafias, that annoying bitch sweetheart with a stupid fucking laugh, they're all drawn really well and their designs are something you'd peel your eyes for. For instance, Sweetheart having a broken heart on a belt while Captain Space Boyfriend has a plaster over where his heart is such a subtle little touch, and I love it. Everything looks dynamic and in motion and emotive, which is important because, you know, emotions. The super appealing design also works well in the horror aspects of the game. The three fears you overcome throughout look terrifying and overwhelming, perfectly describing how Sonny feels about a word being said. The final fight with Basil has the black goo monster literally swallowing him whole, a metaphor for the guilt of keeping your stash of questionable furry images a secret. It works especially well with the thing you see throughout the game, which the only gripe I really have, and this is a nitpick more than anything, it's not the big boy we'll talk about later, is that some of the imagery in black space when you're confronting your forbidden secret is a little nonsensical. I didn't understand why we would kill the cat beyond implying Sonny is some shade of fucked up. I didn't understand why he'd have a finger cut off every time he picked up a photo. I didn't understand all of the hands at the end when you sit down. I have something called the margin of stupidity, and I'm completely willing to say that this all flew over my head. My suspension of disbelief is still very much intact. Very epic. As we all know, I am a man of culture, a connoisseur of the Beethovens, the Mozarts, the Dream Mask song. So when I say that Omori's music is one of the best things about the game, you better goddamn believe it, boy. As I said in the Little Nightmares 2 video, don't watch it by the way, the audio is horrible. Music helps to amplify the emotions of a scene. It sets the tone in its cooperation with the scene's emotion or contrasts it deliberately to convey a certain feeling. In Omori they do this very well, although it's less contrast and more cooperation. The faraway town's music is upbeat to fit with the sunny avenues of the town, yet the park's music is calming and to a slower pace, far more akin to wandering around looking what to do than it is running through the streets with purpose. The calming tones of the music playing in the vast forest and the playground, the fanciful melody of Sweetheart's castle, the extraterrestrial beeps and whooshes of the other world, it all works to make you feel something in that stone cold heart of yours. I also love how the main menu theme acts as a motif in some other songs, especially in scenes revolving around Mari. It's revealed later as to why it's so pertinent to Sunny, but its repeated appearance explains how a lot of things in the game stem from his memories of his sister. But the music truly shines in the boss fights. Oh baby, this shit is good. Sweetheart's boss theme has to be the best, with the solo that comes in at the end where it's all like... People who prefer unbred twins to this also think using a microwave to heat up your drinking water is normal. You are hellspawn, and God has enlisted my help to purge you from this plane of existence. You disgusting fuck. You've probably noticed I've changed the music far too frequently at pretty much every scene change. Congratulations, you now know what it's like to play Omori. The music changes far too much for my liking. I get to one area, and just as I'm starting to enjoy the music, it changes. Once again, a nitpick, so my suspension of disbelief is still intact. Oh yeah, but we also know that music isn't everything. What about the sounds? Well, as a person with ears, I can confirm that the sounds are pretty good. Attacks in battle have weight to them. The buttons and dialogue have that lovely RPG Maker feel to their sounds, and it works to both enrapture and terrify you. Like when the thing turns up, that haunting sound reverberates inside your head while... A last note about the music. See what I did there? When games juggle both comedy and heavier material, there's a risk of one of the two ends smacking the other in the face with a 2x4. In Omori, it's balanced very well. The upbeat moments of optimism and humour never bleed into the depressingly hopeless periods. I truly mean it when I say Omori's biggest asset is its music. But that's enough of that. We're done being the nice guys. We're done being polite. We're now venturing into the uh-oh zone. This is going to be the longest section of a video, as well as the one that will start a flame war in the comments. As someone who likes to create, and has got something out in the public domain, I understand just as much as anyone that people being even the slightest bit critical of my work will ruin me for the rest of the day. So it's for this reason that the funnies aren't going to be as funny anymore. I'm happy to trash games made by AAA companies because they're so large that the blame gets spread out across a lot of different people, and also because the devs are paid so poorly that I imagine they don't really care or even remember the project. A game like Omori, however, is made by one person, if not a whole team, so I don't want to be a prick about their work when I wouldn't want someone to be a prick about mine. It's one thing to be critical, and it's another thing to be a complete arsehole. Let's go. The first big boy, but not the biggest boy, I have an issue with is the gameplay. I love games, and I love play, so putting these two together is quite a good business move to get people like me to give people like you money. Omori's gameplay is comprised of two components, exploring your depraved mind and gang warfare. Omori has a heavy emphasis on exploration and is pretty non-linear in its story. You follow a set of objectives, sure, but you can explore side quests and backtrack at your own pace, as well as follow different routes to the game altogether, such as the that route. This is also encouraged mainly for the Hangman game, a series of letters you need to find to access the coveted black space where your best pal Basil is hiding to get the true ending. Near these letters are other points of interest that widen your search, making searching every nook and cranny of your psyche a rewarding or terrifying experience. I bring this up to circle back to it later. But sometimes when exploring, you are cornered by terrifying beasts, and you must engage in gang warfare to escape alive. The way each of the characters synergize with one another is super satisfying. Mechanics like having follow-ups that can heal, add emotional buffs, or deal extra damage creates a new layer of variety to your strategy. After each major boss fight, the strength and efficiency of your team murder becomes greater. These follow-up moves cost points from the bottom, which accrue if you take damage. Getting this to 10 lets you do your ultimate anime attack, in which you summon the power of the weeaboo gods to smite a woodland critter with the might of United States Air Force. On top of this, you have emotions that work like the Fire Emblem weapons triangle. Happy beats angry, angry beats sad, and sad beats happy. Emotions can stack twice for all party members, but 3 times for Omori and bosses. Your juice bar is your mana, your energy, your PP. If you have no PP, you have to drink your Fortnite Chug Jug to get it back. Dreamworld's combat system had me gripped. So many close calls, so many insane combos, so many instances of Aubrey caving her own skull in to deal a whopping 300 damage to a boss. While I lost a couple of times, especially to this bitch, it was never frustrating. Getting closer and closer to victory every time just made me feel hyped up. But the game doesn't seem to understand why the combat is fun. The combat in the real world to me rapidly became an annoyance I cared absolutely nothing for. What the game doesn't understand is having 4 people to bounce off each other is what makes the combat fun and diverse and complex. But when I only have 2 people to use, both of which have limited skills and inventory, it becomes a super boring game of punches. I swing at them, they swing back, we keep going until one of us falls over. It's not even the fact that I lost pretty much every fight in the real world. I'm pretty sure you're meant to lose a bunch of them. It's more about the fact that the game melted down to pressing Z on every attack button without any thought given to strategy, which was what made the Dreamworld combat so much more fun. On top of this as well, the combat in the real world sets up something that it doesn't really follow through on that I thought would have been really interesting. In your first fight with Aubrey, you assume you know what to do. All you've known up until this point is the dream world. You swing your knife, the thing dies, you get delicious XP. So you hit the fight button without even thinking, only to slash at Aubrey with a knife and have her cry out, ending the fight early. We'll ignore how Kel doesn't reprimand you nearly as severely enough as he should for engaging in a London altercation unprovoked. This was really cool. It made me feel like Sonny did in that moment. He hasn't left the house in 4 years, so all he knows, just like the player, is how to behave in the dream world, and then he applies that to this real world scenario. Swinging at someone with a knife just seems completely normal to him, as it does to the player, so you are perfectly in sync with the character on this shocking revelation. To me, this was the game telling me that the real world would have a greater emphasis on talking to people and exploring and going through the daily life of a small town kid. My inner Night in the Woods fanboy was losing its absolute shit. But then during a conversation I was emotionally invested in, considering it's the same one which you are told your sister is fucking dead, you are forced into a boss fight in which Aubrey beats you with a bat embedded with nails. There's such a heavy disparity in what happened in the first fight to this engagement here that it completely took me out of the moment it had set up just before. The characters are written so well and the story touches upon moving themes that made me just want to hear them talk and argue and work through their problems. Despite the usual fantastic art and music in this scene, the music obviously being one of my favourite tracks from the game, I really disliked this boss fight because it interrupted something that I was so much more invested in. And this happens a lot. Like, people talk, you empathize and you relate to the people talking and their struggles, and then you just have to fight them all of a sudden. I would like deliberately at some points just lose just to get through it, because to me the real world strengths was the strength of character and dialogue. The game really missed the mark by not playing to those strengths and setting a ground rule that stabby time was only allowed in Dream World, not real world. And that's really the main issue with the gameplay. In the dream world, while it perfectly illustrates just how lost in his head Sonny is, I only really liked the combat mechanics in the vivid world. The metaphorical story of confronting the truth by finding your accomplice Basil, someone you make a lot of effort to avoid in the real world, just, it loses me after a bit. But then I get to the real world and it keeps forcing these uninteresting boss fights on me when all I want to do is know more about people. They're made so interesting and deep, but the game keeps hitting you with these jarring fights. I think a bigger boy of an issue I had was that this game is just too long. I played 26 hours of this game to beat it and I didn't explore nearly as much as I could have. Most of the time comes from the dream world, which I'd estimate was a very chunky 70% of the game, and building off what I mentioned earlier about exploration, the whole confronting the truth metaphor of finding Basil just loses you after a while. I wanted more of the real world section. I am not joking or being hyperbolic when I say you could have cut this game down by 50%, if not 75%, and it would have been exactly the same, if not better. 8 hours would have been a healthy length, maybe pushing it at 12 hours for some extra exploration. 26 hours, in my opinion, is not justified. As someone who went literally to the extra side quest area, I can 100% say that it's too long. The Dream World section should have been far shorter. And I'm circling back to what I said before about, you know, this exploration aspect and going out to find extra stuff when you try and find these letters for the Hangman game. It just gets really tedious after a while, and I literally just started using a walkthrough at one point because it was just so long. It went on for so long, and I just wanted it to get to a meaningful point, and it really has this lull in the later half of the game where it's like, okay, I get it. You know, this metaphor about confronting Basil because he's someone you avoid purposely in real life because he's the one thing tying you to the truth. But I just really want to go back to the part where I was like relating to people. It just goes on for way too long, and I start to not care and I start to lose interest. Being upset, being angry, being confused. Like, this was powerful emotion that I was relating to, which keeps getting butted in by this Dream World section that honestly I don't like. I didn't like the Dream World as much as I like the real world. My issues with the gameplay aside, I'm a story man. My Little Nightmares 2 video made this apparent. Once again, don't watch it, the audio sucks. If a story motivates a player enough to keep going despite the gameplay they may not fully enjoy, they will keep going. And I am said player. Omori is a tale in which the psychological horror is that of mental illness. It's very easy for games to slap on the depression meaning after production, because experiences of mental illness vary so inexplicably from one person to the next that as long as you can connect the dots in a somewhat coherent way, people will buy it. But Omori doesn't do that, it actually builds the game around this theme. Depression isn't just being sad, it's how abruptly it can disrupt your routine to such an extent it makes something as menial as, I don't know, walking down a flight of stairs a tasking endeavor. Daily objects and events can trigger something. Sunny's mental status is far more complex than just depression. There's this whole video here explaining his condition, so you should go and watch that if you want to know more, but for simplicity we'll refer to it this way. While Sunny's mental health takes a massive decline after Mari's death, it's also hinted that he's, ever since he can remember, been using white space as escapism from the real world. This makes a point about how, while some forms of mental illness have a specific onset, sometimes it's just there, and there's no real way to eradicate it like some people think you can. It's something some people, unfortunately, have to live with. Sunny finds himself left with only 3 days before he moves town, a metaphor for moving on from the past despite the pain of doing so, and sets out to make amends and build bridges with his old gang, at least in a normal route. But you come to find that the rest of the group isn't doing so well either. Kel's still Kel, albeit a lot more mature, but a graveside conversation tells you he took a bit of a bump when his older brother, Hero, fell into a potent depression and lashed out at him. He's the least scathed of the group. Hero, while still as charming and beaming as ever, is still wounded on the inside as he was pretty much Mari's boyfriend. Through a couple of private conversations with him, as well as one final farewell at Mari's grave, the barriers come down and it reveals the guilt and regret he bears for not seeing the signs. Aubrey, arguably, is the most battered of them all. She lives in rancid conditions, her mother left either uncaring or lost in grief after Aubrey's father left them, and her decline contrasts Kel's ascension into maturity. Kel went from immature hooligan to reliable pal, whereas Aubrey did the exact opposite. There is still consistency to their character, sure, but this subtle duality between these two characters is something I picked up on. Another example of the subtle detailing is Mari herself in the dream world. She acts as a save point in the game, sitting beside her picnic blanket throughout the world. As Sunny spent so much time at her picnics, he associates the good times he had with her, his one sibling who was always there to support him. Mari's picnics in his head is a literal safe space, and it perfectly represents what save points are. That one place in the game where you know you are completely safe from harm. This is backed up by the fact when you go to confront the terrible truth, Mari, as well as the picnic blanket itself, is nowhere to be found. Just the basket. Sunny, so close to what has left him a recluse for 4 years, feels vulnerable and unsafe, represented perfectly by the basket and the absence of his sister and the blanket. You see, it's these subtle details on top of a story that already captivates me that kept me going. I wanted to see these people argue and resolve their differences. I wanted the gang to reunite and get that closure they had been searching for so long. I wanted Sunny to move on and be happy. It's so powerful because suicide, unfortunately, can happen to anyone. The trials and tribulations of life, of existing, can get to anyone. People like Mari, people who are constantly smiling and doing their best for others, especially when they have little siblings who rely on them for support mentally, crack under the pressure of it all. And at some point, unfortunately, take drastic measures as a result of accruing issues they feel like they can never speak about in order to not burden their friends. It says so much without saying much at all. So 1 hour away from beating the game, lost in the recesses of black space, I brought up how I was already excited to make a video on Omori and why it works so well. I knew it would land somewhere on my top 10 list, weird creator behavior aside, and I was looking forward to finally reaching the game's conclusion. But then, after around 25 hours of gameplay, and really affecting content I had spoken about just now, this happened.
Can I look at the photo album? I need to see the photo album. I need to see what is being said. Oh, fuck you. You've ruined it. You've ruined the game.
It breaks my heart to say this. It really does. But part of me, both then and now, wished I had not finished the game. I am sure there are plenty of people who would go to game theory lengths to justify the logistics of two 12-year-old kids hauling a nearly adult body out of the house and managing to hang it from a tree, but after the twist, I just couldn't buy it. I spent the next hour, instead of enjoying the rest of it, just confused as to why a game that had already been doing so well gambled on a twist that I really don't think fits in, and in the most respectful way I can muster, it just felt cheap. It felt like a cheap twist. The issue is that the game, for 25 hours, had me hooked on the stuff I listed beforehand. Seeing people reconnect despite difficulties, overcoming insurmountable trauma, finding out that you're not the only one stuck in this limbo of trying to move on yet not wanting to leave the past behind. All of this, to me, it just doesn't fit with the twist. I can relate to deep emotion and arguments and conflict and tenuous resolution. I don't care what the police try to pin on me, I can't relate to manslaughter. This twist subverts expectations in the same way a lorry blindsides a car at 100 miles an hour. And I'm sorry if that sounds mean, I kind of feel proud of that line, and I also felt it embodied my main issue. This twist attacks the foundation, the thing I've been in love with, of the entire experience. Take, for example, these two scenes. The one where you talk to Kel at Mari's grave, and the one where you speak to Hiro in the piano room. Now, before you know about the twist, these are really heart-wrenching moments. Two people, devastated by loss, as well as witnessing the grief hurt their sibling, pouring out emotions to you in a hesitant reminiscence. Sonny stands there, silent as ever, just listening like a good friend despite it all. But now knowing the twist, these two scenes, they almost seem disingenuous to me. Sonny killing Mari was so traumatic that he literally created a fantasy world to escape into to suppress the guilt from it. Yet, when listening to two close friends recount just how much Mari's death, which is something he caused, ruined them, he doesn't react. He doesn't abruptly leave the conversation, he doesn't become visibly uncomfortable, he doesn't drift off into the dream world to suppress the memory. He does nothing but stand there, which seems a lot more akin to not caring at all, a lot more than him being so destroyed that he doesn't feel emotion anymore. The second part is not true. We know he feels emotion, especially fear, because he's terrified when confronting his phobias. It's a disparity that wouldn't exist if this twist had not come into play. The twist also affects another section of the game. Just before the final boss fight with Omori, the game has Aubrey, Kel, and Hiro speak to you about forgiveness and how confessing is a good thing. And while I agree with these sentiments, he's telling himself this. This isn't Nem. This is him. He didn't take these lines he heard from conversations in the context of him killing Mari. These are lines that apply to the assumption she killed herself. So him using these snippets to reassure himself they won't hate him made it seem more disingenuous to me. It comes off as if he's deflecting blame or guilt with the whole "we won't hate you" stuff, but simultaneously I know that's not true because everything up until that point contradicts that. I know the creators aren't going for this sort of sadistic twist, yet everything that's going on as a result of the twist just seems to indicate that. Once again, if the twist was not there, this would be fine because the context in which these lines are spoken would align with the truth. Mari killed herself, and Sonny knows that. And the trauma comes from the fact that, I don't know, maybe he was the one to find her body. It wouldn't feel like he's deflecting blame. It would feel like him reconnecting with friends has helped him muster enough courage to confront his addiction to his fantasy world, which then coincides with the whole idea of confessing your difficulties and struggles to others instead of bottling them up like Mari did. And the endings, in my opinion, they're not great either. As morbid as it is to say, the bad ending where Sonny jumps off the hospital roof was the most affecting one. The guilt is too much to bear and he just wants to be lost in a dream world forever. But the good ending, which is the one I got, I didn't think I did, someone in chat told me I didn't, but I got it, was really weak. He walks into Basil's hospital room, he says he needs to tell the group something, which is the first time he speaks, but the significance of that was lost on me after the twist. And then it cuts to the car driving along with credits. Now, I know this is the metaphor of moving on from the past, but I don't think telling the poop of people? Okay. Now, I know this is a metaphor for moving on, but I don't think telling the group of people ruined by Mari's death that he was the one to cause it and he's hid it for 4 years would have had such an amicable ending. People aren't usually cordial when hit with a high-velocity projectile that is a murder confession. And I don't believe for a second Basil would be able to cope with that. You know, Basil, who's established to be this sensitive and fragile character, would die of a heart attack when Sonny delivers this confession completely unprompted. You know, they don't agree to tell them about this. All it is that Basil feels really guilty about keeping it hidden. So there's no convening about this. This would destroy him. This would feel more satisfying if the twist wasn't there, because it would be about Sonny's struggles with the guilt and trauma of his sister's death, especially with the true ending. Sonny smiling at Basil would be reassuring that no matter the distance, they'd always be there to ward off the guilt and move forward. But in the context of the twist, it seems almost akin to like 2 murder accomplices getting away with it. Another game that suffered from this was Night in the Woods. It's ultimately a game about walking around and talking to people, but there was a horror plot in the game that kind of felt super rushed, because while it is hinted at the start with the whole missing arm stuff, it only really blooms at the end of the game with all the stuff about some demon in a hole eating the homeless to keep the town alive. And while that is a cool concept, they didn't really build on it in a satisfying way. It's sort of just out of the blue. The issue is that while I imagine this was something meant to be included from the start, they didn't pace it very well. 1 second we're talking about May's intricate mental state on a couch, the next we're in a cavern with a cult. Fortunately, it's so rushed that it's very easy to just ignore it, as well as it most likely being a metaphor for how sometimes life really just fucks you up, but you've got to keep moving. But the principal issue here is the same with Omori. You have me connecting to something for a very, very long time, only to try and switch out at the last hurdle in the hopes it will shock me. But I've become addicted to the first thing, especially when you had me play 25 hours of it. So trying to switch it out last second is like making a chronic heroin addict go cold turkey on a fucking ham sandwich. If you wanted me to entertain this idea that Sonny killed his sister, it should have been made apparent earlier on, so that way scenes like Kel and Hiro's monologues come off more as dramatic irony, and it doesn't compromise the game nearly as much as it does when it's a curveball you're hit with at the finish line. But the best outcome, in my opinion, would have been to not have Sonny kill Mari. With all respect, I jokingly throughout the stream suggested this was the twist, and when it was actually the twist, I'm gonna be honest, I just crumpled inwards. It compromises everything I've been playing this game for in the first place. As much as video games are about the journey as much as the ending, you know, Before Your Eyes and Night in the Woods, they're only so affecting because of all the time investment before that. The ending justifies the time investment. Before Your Eyes made me sob with only 2 hours of gameplay, and I can 100% guarantee you that if it had tried to then suggest at the end I was actually some demon child who killed my family, who like falsely got into heaven, it would have ruined it completely. Now this next bit I have rewritten like 10 fucking times in an effort to convey how much better this game could have been if it stuck to its guns. This is the best I've come up with, you know, trying to be coherent to make sure I don't have to explain anything in the comments or the description. So, here we go. Please don't shoot me. If Omori had made it so Mari died by suicide, all of the stuff I said prior would count. The moral of how bottling up emotion can lead to irreparable damage, as to how friends are always there for each other like the gang says at the end, and that the hardest part is withstanding the altitude sickness you get from saying something as simple as I'm not okay. But even further than that, all the symbolism towards the end would have been cooler. Let's take this hypothetical version of the game I'm about to suggest. So Sonny's horrible truth is that he's the one who finds his sister dead outside. A haunting experience that leaves him forever troubled by the Thing, a phantom with a shape that mimics her long hair falling down in front of her face while she's hanging from the tree. In rage of himself for being so selfish as to never be there for her as she was for him, he smashes his violin, a gift his sister gave him, and becomes a recluse for 4 years. The gang ultimately falls apart. Sonny then finds himself left with only 3 days before he leaves the town forever, and he takes it upon himself to reconnect with his friends and confront that horrific day. You know, all the same stuff could happen after that. 70% of the game is the dream world, blah blah blah. But in this version, I like to think the dream world takes a backseat. It becomes a little bit more of a metaphorical playground. Instead, you have the fun and dynamic combat come over to the real world, with you in a party with your old pals. At first, they're all hesitant and awkward, unsure of how to approach one another, but over time, they come to regrow those lost friendships. And I think then it allows for a lot more creative exploration in the real world. For instance, with the unbred twins, you know, maybe have some dream world elements sort of start to bleed into the real world when he starts being confronted with the trauma. It would just make it a lot more exciting and a lot less bland. But then, on the last day before you move, you confront that horrible day you've suppressed for 4 years. You confront your guilt of how you feel selfish for never being there for her as she was for you. But then you realise it's not your fault. That Mari's passing, as tragic as it was, did not fall on your lap. That she wouldn't want you to be stuck for the rest of your life. You go and take the broken violin from the toy box and fix it. Each piece you repair plays a powerful memory from you and the gang until you finally repair it. You take the violin into the piano room and you confront Omori, a representative of your addiction to the dream world and a suppression of the past. You fight him, but ultimately he does not succumb. But while Omori will not succumb, neither will you. And despite the odds, you play the violin. After 4 years of anguish and pain, after 4 years of suffering in silence, you finally let the world know that you are not okay, and that while the past hurts, you are going to do your best to move on. You share a tearful goodbye with your friends as you get into the car to leave, their promises to visit you a metaphor for how while you should move on, you should never forget the past, and then the credits roll. To me, this version of the game would have made me cry. This would have built upon the foundation, this would have made use of those core themes until the very end. I see all of these people, you know, crying, reacting during the final duet, and you don't understand how bad I wanted to. I seriously wanted to. Moments like Hero's Lament at Mari's grave was really touching and well written. But I couldn't. The twist distracted me from everything it had brought me through. And unfortunately, I think the final nail in the coffin for me is how it left me afterwards, 2 AM on a Monday morning. After I beat Before Your Eyes, I couldn't sleep for a week. It sounds hyperbolic, but I'd sometimes think of that credits song and think back to little Benny smiling as he passes on, and it would drive a hole into my stomach. But when I think back to Omori, I never have that about the twist. I'm never being kept up at night thinking about the poignance of the ending. Instead, I'm longing for those real-world moments of sincere conversation, but they're just so few and far between, sparsely placed across either the monotonous dream world or boring real world fights, that I don't have that void of not knowing what to do with myself once I'm done. Ironically enough, I think the only thing I really took with me about Omori was the message about moving on, because once I finished the game, I just fucking left. Look, I'm not saying it's wrong people enjoyed this game. I'm not saying that people who think it's a masterpiece are dumb or stupid. I'm not even saying that you, at home, have to agree with me. I'd be naive as hell to think that something as subjective as video game taste will always align with my opinion. There's a reason I sung this game's praises at the start of the video to show that I am someone who genuinely engaged with this game and I'm not just being contrarian for views. I think that objectively there is a lot of effort and passion put into this game that makes it a goddamn good game, but for me, Omori didn't leave me with that feeling Before Your Eyes did. And while I look forward to Omocat's next big project, provided there's no more weird tweets from her, Omori left me disappointed. And ultimately, this is why I disliked OMORI. Hey guys, Smug here. I don't know if you'd believe me, if I told you that I actually intended for this video to be like 20 minutes long. But it turns out I have a lot to say about Omori, so that's why it's 40 minutes, I think. Thank you for sitting through a video this long. This is actually a double upload, so there's something else uploaded on the channel that's going to be a lot shorter, and it's actually me playing a game. It's not just raw gameplay, it is edited stuff, but, you know, it's a little bit different, so if it interests you, please do go and check it out. I hope you have enjoyed it, and even if you don't agree with what I've said, you know, that video games are one of those creative, subjective mediums where disagreement is cool, you know, like, it's completely fine to disagree with me on this, I won't take any offense, but those were just my thoughts. And even though LGBT month is over, Pride month is a mindset, and it's never over. So stay well, stay safe, stay you. Grazie di tutto. Ciao.